Pokemon! Bro, who doesn't love Pokemon? Look, if you've been around ever since the late 1990s, you know what Pokemon is. And like Mario, Pikachu has pretty much been plastered on every product imaginable. Especially if you go to Walmart. Heck, if you think about it, Pikachu is basically like the Japanese Mickey Mouse. And I can't even stand Mickey Mouse. But I like Pokemon. You probably also know these three: Bulbasaur, Charmander, and Squirtle. Like, even if you're not a Pokemon fan, you've seen these three at least like 3 times. And their fully evolved forms, Venusaur, Charizard, and Blastoise, now those are some peak designs. Just not peak game design. Yeah, sorry to say it, but the thing with starter Pokemon is that sometimes some of them are just better than others, like significantly. And hang on a minute, Professor Oak. How come more times than not you're the only person in the entire Kanto region who has these Pokemon? What did you do with the rest of their kind? Now you better start giving me some answers before my Ho-Oh Sacred fires your... So as cool and rare starter Pokemon are, right? Even when they reach their final, fully evolved forms, quite a few of them are just still kind of bad. Like, they're just kind of weak. And I think that's just messed up. So this video will be part 1 of an ongoing series where we buff every single fully evolved starter Pokemon. But wait, there are some rules that I'm putting on myself. Rule number 1 is that by the end of this series, all starter Pokemon will have the same base stat total. Because sometimes I've noticed that some starter Pokemon just flat out have more stats than others, and I think that's unfair. And rule number 2, and the last rule, is that I am not taking any sort of competitive Pokemon formats into consideration in this video. Cause that's boring, and I want to have fun with this video. Alright? We got that? Cool? Now let the buffing begin! Now there are 3 ways that I'm going to be buffing these starter Pokemon. 1, we're going to be increasing all their base stat totals to 550, because I think that's a good number to reach. Number 2 is that everybody's going to get a new ability that will not replace their hidden ability. Now how is that going to work? Well, you see, Pokemon can have up to 3 abilities, but starter Pokemon tend to only have 2. So what we're going to do is we're going to give every starter Pokemon a new ability that pretty much just fits in between their regular ability, which is like Overgrow, Blaze, and Torrent. They always have those 3, and their hidden ability. And the third way, which only applies to some Pokemon, for some of them, we're just gonna have to completely redo their stats because they're just so terrible. Alright? That's pretty much it. So now let the buffing begin. Okay, so starting with Venusaur, and not gonna lie, I gotta break it to you, Venusaur is probably one of the only Pokemon here that doesn't actually need a buff. Like, what makes Venusaur so good is that ability right there, its hidden ability Chlorophyll. And what it does is, basically, if the sun is up during battle, it makes a strong Pokemon like Venusaur also the fastest Pokemon on the field. Like, it will always go first if there's sun up. It also pretty much has near perfect coverage with these 3 moves alone. And also its stats are pretty much perfect for it, so we don't actually have to tweak much when giving it its new base stat total. So say goodbye to these stats, and say hello to... these. So yeah, as we can see, well, I pretty much just took out as much attack as possible to make sure that everything else was just much better. We slightly increased its speed, special attack, and HP. Actually, we increased HP by a lot, but hey. So, with these much better stats, what new ability are we giving it? Well, how about Thick Fat? Which is really useful on a grass type like Venusaur because it basically takes away its 2 main weaknesses, that being fire and ice type moves. But Nate, Thick Fat is the ability of Venusaur's Mega Evolution. Well, I'm glad you mentioned that, because we're gonna be buffing the Megas too. Now these stats are pretty decent, right? In fact, they could be considered good. but they're nothing compared to these new stats that I'm giving it. Look at that juicy new 140 special attack. Oh yeah, I may have forgot to mention this, but we're also giving Pokemon new moves. And like I said, Venusaur's coverage is already pretty much perfect for it. But one thing we can add is the new move Pollen Puff, which can really help with Psychic types since a Venusaur's part Poison type. Now Charizard is meant to be a fast, fire-breathing special attacker. The only problem is that nowadays these stats are just not good enough at doing that. But don't worry Charizard, because we're gonna make these stats better. So say goodbye to those stats and say hello to these! Okay, so now you might notice a pattern where we have to take out some points in one stat to recycle them into others. But on the other hand, oh my goodness! Look at that new speed and special attack stat. Now those are some high stats. Now that Charizard is much faster and stronger, what's its new ability? How about we give it Aerialate to give it more flying type moves? Alright, listen. If this big flying lizard can use Aerialate, then why can't this one? Heck, or even this one for that matter. You know what? We'll give it to him too. Now Charizard is also probably the most cunning Pokemon of all time, because it probably convinced Game Freak to give it 2 Mega Evolutions when the other 2 only got 1. And that's how we got these 2 monstrosities. Well, I guess we better buff them too, I guess. Now, like Venusaur, these 2 Megas definitely do not need buffs. In fact, back when these 2 Charizards came out in Gen 6, X and Y, they were pretty much the Megas to beat. Starting with Mega Charizard X, the black one, these stats are already great. But what if we can make them better? Well, I did, and I think you may notice something insane. Yup, we took out some defense, but I think you know where it went. 135 speed? Huh. 135 speed my behind, and we're gonna do the exact same thing for Mega Charizard Y. Now, unlike Venusaur, Charizard definitely needs more coverage. So how many new moves are we giving it? That many. But wait a minute, I know this may seem like a lot, but I can explain. Now obviously I'm giving it Hyper Voice because it'll become a stab flying type move thanks to Aerialate. And also because I finally want Charizard to have a good flying type move that's not Air Slash. Now if you look at Charizard's move pool, you'll notice that it's actually pretty diverse and has a lot of really decent coverage moves if you look at it. On the physical side. But seriously Game Freak, why did you give Charizard so many physical moves even though it's meant to be a special attacker? And his special coverage moves are either Focus Blast, or just not very consistent. So since Charizard can already learn Electric, Fighting, Ghost, Ground, and Grass moves, why not just give it special variants of the moves it already gets that it would actually want to use? Yeah, I'm sorry to say this, but Blastoise might be the worst of the original 3 Kanto starters, because it's not really fast enough, strong enough, or really bulky enough for a fully evolved Pokemon. But don't worry Blastoise, because say goodbye to your meager stats, and say hello to these new stats! So yeah, as we can see, we basically just take out as much attack and speed as possible to put as much bulk and power as possible. But in case of your little sad I took away some of its speed, luckily in newer generations Blastoise still gets Shell Smash if you want it to be a fast sweeper. Now, as for the ability, yeah, I'm sorry, I'm not going to be as creative here as I was for Charizard, but we're pretty much just going to give it the ability of its Mega Evolution, which is Mega Launcher, because it's actually the most perfect ability for it. It has cannons on its back. Now, speaking of the Mega, it's pretty much the exact same thing. Take out as much attack and speed, so 103 down to 80 attack, and 78 speed down to 60, we didn't really change it, and give it as much bulk as possible. So yeah, 100 HP, 130 defense, 145 special attack, which is higher than Venusaur that I gave, and much higher special defense in 135. So yeah, less attack, less speed, more bulk, more tankiness. Okay, new moves. Okay, as for new moves, unlike Charizard, we actually don't need to do much. In fact, Blastoise is more similar to Venusaur, because Blastoise's coverage is actually perfect with Mega Launcher. So we only really need to tack on like 1 or 2 moves, like I guess Earth Power for electric types, and I guess if you want, even Life Dew to give it some reliable recovery, because it doesn't actually get that as a bulky Pokemon. And we've done it! We have successfully made all 3 Kanto starters better, faster, and stronger. And if you thought these buffs were crazy, well, I'm just getting started. And like I said, this is only part 1 of me giving buffs to all starters from all Pokemon generations. So stay tuned for when those new parts come out. And as always, if you made it this far, thank you for watching. Be cool with Jesus. See ya.